First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us and be able to give you an overview of one of those schemes that, as Laurent from RMS previously said in the previous session, in Europe there are several arrangements to cope with natural hazards and insurance, and the Spanish one is one of them. And well, without further ado, I will start by, well, the outline of this presentation will be to try to explain a bit about the Consorcio de Compensación de Seguros, or Insurance Compensation Consortium. Afterwards, we will try to, well, I will try to explain you how the extraordinary risk insurance scheme in Spain works. We will have a few slides about the combined agricultural insurance and the role of CCS in it, and some reflections about the climate change and insurance from the Spanish and this scheme perspectives. Well, yep, sorry. The Consorcio is a, oh. It's alive. Well, again, it's alive, sorry. Oh my God. And I'm being very clumsy, I'm sorry.
No, you don't need to follow both screens.
Yeah, better, sorry, thank you. Well, in spite of what the name suggests, the Consorcio is not a pool, it's an enterprise. It's a public enterprise that is attached to the Ministry of Economy. And the main common thing that can be said about the Consorcio is that it's a toolbox at the service of the Spanish insurance sector in trying to help the sector deal with several different contingencies, such as extraordinary risks, NatCat, for instance, the bankruptcy of an insurance company. We also have roles in automobile insurance, agricultural insurance, environmental, nuclear, and register of compulsory insurances, etc. So we are a toolbox of different things that sometimes don't have anything to do one with the other, but we are at the service of the sector. The Consorcio was originated after the Spanish Civil War. That technically wasn't in the government of the time. Terminology wasn't a war, was a riot, and that was why the Consorcio was created in order to help insurance company cope with the enormous disasters that were caused by the war. And it was meant to be a provisional tool, but after a series of disasters caused mainly by the very poor infrastructure of the time after the war and after the international isolation of Spain, it was created as a permanent tool in 1954. The current status, the current bylaw, comes from 1991, and it's been adapted to the European Union legislation. So, Consorcio has its own legal nature. It's a public business institution. It has full operational capacity. It is subject to the same laws of any insurance company. It has its own assets that are independent to the state. That means that we are receiving no money at all, not a single cent, from the public budget. We are funded by the surcharges, the premiums, and the investment returns. The Board of Administration has a private-public parity, and as I said, has multiple functions, and it is a complement of the market. We are in any means competing with the market. We are helping market cope with what actually the market says in the Board of Administration. And it's flexible. I mean that now we are covering some things that we weren't covering 20 years ago, and probably we won't be covering the same things in 20 years' time. So we are adaptable. And also we have a nationwide mostly trying to deal with claims from from the whole country. We have 18 branch offices. So the organization, the chairperson of the Board of Administration is actually the Director General for Insurance and Pension Funds, that is the regulator. And there are also 14 members appointed by the Minister of Economy, and of those, 7 are members from private insurance companies. The current composition is there. And the other seven members come from the public administration, from different ministries and relevant authorities. The composition of the private companies in the Board of Administration of the Consortio changes or is renovated partially every 3 years. The structure, the president, well, that's for the Board of Administration, and this is for the normal operation of the Consortio. There is a president. The president is the Director General of the Regulatory Authority, but there is a CEO, a General Manager in-house, and 6 directorates and several the branch offices and also several services, depending directly on the General Manager. And the staff as 31st of December of last year is 312 people working for Consortio. I'm going to change now into the second point, which is the extraordinary risk scheme. The main principles are the universality, and it is the compulsory nature of the coverage in trying to minimize adverse selection. It is important to say that insurance is not mandatory. What is mandatory is to cover extraordinary risks. This is important that you take this. So if you have a house in Spain, it's not compulsory for you to have an insurance. But if you buy or if you underwrite a policy for this house, this policy has to include mandatorily the extraordinary risks clause. And here comes the compensation. The compensation, it's meant to be geographical among very heterogeneous risks, and also in time, in trying to flat, the different oscillation between claim rates from one year to the other. There is a flat rate, which is risk-based, but risk-based on aggregate of all the claim experience that we are having, and we have quite a few years to calculate them. We are operating, we have 75 years of operation. And the idea is to be partners of the private sector, and again, I underline that is a complement of the insurance market, and it is meant to be affordable. That's why surcharges are kept at the minimum possible level, and when possible, and in the last years we have done so, they are going down. What are we covering under the extraordinary risk scheme? Well, we have both natural and man-made disasters. Natural ones are flood, runoff flood or riverine flood, coastal flood, winds exceeding 120 kilometers per hour, and tornado, earthquake, volcanic eruptions, meteorite, and from the man-made, terrorism, rebellion, insurrection, and riot, that, as I said, was the origin of the Consortio, and also the actions of armed force in peacetime. I mean, military drills or some kind of damages that can be caused by that. The compensation and the reason why the surcharges are applied on a flat rate, as we are covering very different risks. For instance, this is the maximum rainfall in 24 hours for 2 centuries, and well, you see, it is not the same in different parts of the country. The areas of potentially significant flood risk, as mandatory by the European Commission directive, are in the second map. The third one are the observed tornadoes and waterspouts in the last 15 years. And in the fourth one, the areas exceeding 120 kilometers per hour after the winter storm closed in 2009. That's it. Of course, the superposition is not neutral, but some things compensate with the others. And this is the seismic hazard in Spain, which is the biggest in the southeast. If you add to this terrorism, riots, etc., well, then you will understand that the risk covered are quite different, and that justifies, in our view, to have a flat rate for them. How does contracting work? There is one single insurance policy, but there are two simultaneous covers into the same policy. The mandatory clause is mandatory. It's applied in the insurance lines of damage to property and also in life and/or personal accidents. So in the same policy, you have two covers. The ordinary for thefts or whatever, which is sold by the private insurer. The tariff is free, of course, and they pay a premium. And the extraordinary risks, flood, terrorism, etc., which goes to the Consorcio de Compensación de Seguros, and it's paid through the compulsory surcharge. It's financed because, or thanks to the rate applied on the amount insured of the ordinary policy. The idea of apply it to the amount insured and not to the prime is to minimize the differences between different underwriters. And the insurance companies collect the surcharges together with the premium and then transfer on a monthly basis the surcharges to the CCS and retain a 5% for handling costs. These are the rates. For instance, for property insurance, for housing is 0.08 per mil. That means that if you are insuring your house for €500,000, you are paying €40 a year to the consortio to have all these covers. And, well, there are. In the case of motor vehicles, then it's a flat rate for the different kinds of motor vehicles. And for instance, for a car, it's 2.10 euros. Last year, it was €3.50, and now it's 2.10. It has been lowered. And what are we compensating? We are compensating in property from direct property damages, both repair or replacement, depending on the case, and also some supplementary expensive, and also we are indemnifying for business interruption. And in the case of accident and life, death, permanent and temporary disability. It's important to underline that we are compensating in property, obviously for losses occurred in Spain, but for personal injuries or life, we are also compensating for events occurring abroad Spain. That is, if you are a Spanish resident and you have underwritten a policy with a Spanish company and you have then paid the surcharge, if you are affected by an earthquake in Nepal, then you will have right to a compensation if you are affected by it. And the compensation terms are exactly the same ones that were established in the ordinary policy. For the same property or persons, from the same sum insured, and in the same compensation conditions. There are some deductibles, essentially for commercial, for commerce, industry, etc., but there are no deductibles for personal residence and for personal injuries, and for cars as well. There are no deductibles. And in the case of business interruption, the deductible policy is the same one that is established in the ordinary policy. So the coverage has these features. It's defined by law, so there are no possible misunderstanding. It's every time we change our covers or the conditions in our covers, it's reflected in the official bulletin of Spain. So it's crystal clear. It's qualitative but not quantitative. For instance, if you have a damage from an earthquake, we pay from a base to the whole house. We don't care about that. We don't even need an official declaration about the catastrophic nature of the events. Once we know that this catastrophe has been triggered by one of those natural catastrophes that are listed, we apply, or we take the cover automatically. And that means also that the consortio is not a reinsurer. We are a direct insurer that intervenes whenever one of these events is the cause of the claim. In terms of the number of policies and insured capital subject to coverage, well, it goes obviously parallel to the development of the Spanish market. Currently, there are about 100 million policies, about half property and half accidents and life. There is a jump there because the CCS coverage was incorporated to the Lifeline in 2007. And in terms of capital insured, well, it's about 6 trillion in property and about 10 trillion euros in life and accident. A reflection about the size of Spain and its economy. There are 4 countries in the world that have essentially the same GDP, which are Australia, Canada, Spain, and New Zealand, and in South Korea. So that's the size of the market in which we are operating. And this is the balance between our income, the surcharges, and our payments, the losses for us. Some years are better than others, but some years we have to pay more than we have as income. But in general, of course, the surcharges goes very much in line with the penetration of insurance in Spain, obviously. And according to the cause, 97% of the claims that we are handling are of natural origin, and 93% are of the amounts paid are of natural as well, of natural origin. As you know, in Spain we had a problem with terrorism, but happily it's over, apparently, and it's no longer important. And for this 93%, 75% is flood, 18% is wind, and 9% is earthquake. That means that 91% of our claims in natural disasters are of hydrometeorological origin. And if you see the number of claims on hydrometeorological grounds, it's been going up. It has multiplied 5-fold, more or less. This is the Klaus winter storm that was the record, that we have almost 300,000 claims from Klaus. In terms of the amount paid by hydrometeorological grounds, the quantity on current euros of 2015 has a bit more than doubled. But if you combine both, that means that the mean cost per claim of the indemnization paid by the consortio has been divided by 3 or 4. That means that in spite of applying a flat rate and in spite of providing a wide coverage, that is not hampering the adoption of risk reduction measures, and actually the risk has considerably reduced in the last 35 years. Here you are some relevant recent catastrophic events. Klaus already mentioned. The earthquake in Lorca, which is a city of 90,000 inhabitants in the southeast Spain, and some flood events. These are the biggest ones in the last 5 or 10 years. That comparably are not so heavy as in other parts of Europe. So I don't know if we have a better or we are lucky or no, but apparently it's not that bad. And this example is something of our current day-by-day operation that, of course, are very small events that we are handling them constantly. As we don't have shareholders, or with this part, we are creating an equalization reserve, which is a real catastrophe fund. Of course, we pay taxes for this, and after taxes, current situation is 7.5 billion euros. The risk is not transferred to the reinsurance market because it's deemed that with this fund, we have done, of course, research, and we have done studies, actuarial studies, etc. And we deem that with this is okay to deal with more or less ordinary claim situation. But legally, we have the possibility to transfer the risk to the insurance market. There's nothing against it, only that by now we don't deem it necessary. And yes, there is a state guarantee in case the fund is not enough, but in our 75 years of existence, it has never been used. Now the extraordinary risk is over, and I will shift to the combined agricultural insurance. The current scheme is in place since 1980. It is voluntary, but if the farmer decides to take insurance, in order to avoid adverse selection, he or she must underwrite all the similar growth in crops. Sorry, the similar crops that belongs to him or her. In this case, the cover is provided by a pool. The composition varies annually, and it's approved by the regulator. In 2016, are 24 companies. The management and administration is endorsed to a private company, which is called Agroseguro. And there is state support through the National Body of Agricultural Insurance, ENESA. It is also subsidized eventually by regional governments. And during its lifetime, it has achieved sustainability, solvency, and provides cover for most agricultural production and against most climatological risks. What is the role of CCS, of the consortium, in the combined agricultural insurance? Well, we are the reinsurer. In this case, yes, we are the reinsurer of the agricultural insurance, and we apply different surcharges to the primes depending on the risk and on the activity line. And then the possible benefits after taxes are added to another equalization reserve that, as today, has about 830 million euros. And the consortium is also integrated in the co-insurance pool. Now it's taking 10% of the risk, but at the beginning, when it was very much experimental and it incurred in default almost systematically, it took practically 50% of the risk. And also, the other function of the CCS is to assess and supervise the losses adjustments. This is how it works. The insured pays a premium to Agroseguro, and it pays the indemnization. There are several co-insurers, and CCS is one of them. There are subsidies by the state, by ENESA, and also by the regions. There is, in some lines, there is a complementary fully private reinsurance, and there is also a reinsurance contract between Agroseguro and the consortium, thanks to the premium which is creating an equalization reserve, and it works as an Excel reinsurance. And it's also possible, but not necessary by the moment, to have a retrocession contract from CCS to another reinsurers. And the other role of CCS is to control the adjustments that are normally done by Agroseguro. This is a bit of the history of the combined agricultural insurance. It started in the 80s, as I said, and at the beginning, it was, this is the cost of claims, the red line, the green line is the commercial prime income. And, well, the first 12 years were quite bad. Afterward, we kind of adjusted, and the penetration of the agricultural insurance grew a lot. And in the third period, that kind of started when the economic crisis of 2008, it's more or less stable. In Spain, the main agricultural risk is drought, and the years with drought are clearly marked. And well, this is the these are the red lines are the payments made by the consortio in terms of the reinsurance, and these are the reinsurance primes, and the orange are the level of the equalization fund for the reinsurance of the consortio. And as you see, we have also been significantly lowering the surcharges for the agricultural insurance once this fund has achieved a good level of solvency. And for last, what do we do in terms of climate change and insurance? Well, we work together as a public institution. We work together with all the Spanish institutions dealing with different hazards, and particularly dealing with climate change and its consequences. There is, as you know, a World Forum of Catastrophe Programs that are the catastrophe programs more or less public in the world, and we are part of them. And we also are an active participant in other forums, such as OECD. We also intervened in COP21. And about the current and the future situation. Well, these are the hazards, the climate-related hazards covered currently in Spain. For this other, flood, coastal flood, strong wind, and tornado, then it is the extraordinary risk insurance by consortio already explained. And for those risks potentially harmful to agriculture and livestock, such as flood, hail, it should say hail here, flood, drought, heat wave, frost, and strong wind, then it's the combined agricultural insurance, which is a system that I have already explained. For the future, well, we might think of different thresholds of the current ones, and we might think of other hazards that currently are not considered, such as heat wave, for instance, the impact of heat waves in life insurance, pandemic, drought, or other natural disasters. Well, we'll see. In the case of potential, if they are potentially hazardous for properties and individuals, the alternatives are that they are covered by the private insurance company, that they are covered by the private insurance industry with the CCS participating somehow as a co-insurer or reinsurer, which should be a temporary solution, or should be directly covered or included into the extraordinary risk scheme managed by CCS. That means an extension of the current one. And in the case that they are potentially hazardous for agriculture and livestock, the combined agricultural insurance divides in two lines: those viable, which are the less risky, and the experimental lines, which are more risky. In this case, there can be less public support to premiums and less participation from CCS in the viable lines, and transfer this support, this public support, to the experimental lines. This is how we are thinking about doing this. But as I said at the beginning, the system is flexible. Up until 1987, hail, the direct effects from rain and from snow were covered by consortia. But after 1987, the market said that they could handle this, and we transferred them. For wind, we had a quite baroque definition of a typical cyclonic storm to cover damages from wind. In 2003, we started covering damages from winds exceeding 135 kilometers per hour, and in 2007 we lowered the thresholds to 120. That means that we are always talking to the private market, and we decide jointly where is the consortium who takes and when is the market who takes cover. And the conclusions, well, the three first ones are already being said in this morning, so I will skip them. But, well, Spain has quite an original approach, which is the extraordinary risk scheme, which is based on the principle of public-private cooperation, The system is managed by a public institution, the consortium, but it is synergic and cooperative with the market. It is a holistic solution. We are not covering flood. We are not only covering terrorism. We are not only covering earthquake. We cover everything. And thus, we address different extraordinary risks, which are hydrometeorological, geological, and social. And the system is flexible, and the evolution is an integral part of the system, and that's why we believe that we are in quite a good position to deal with the emerging risks from climate change. So thank you very much for your attention.